97.3 ESPN.com. Phillies insider Frank Klose from sportstalkphilly.com, Philadelphia.com for more on today's game and this year's season for the Phils. Frank, Phillies finalized their roster over the weekend, and I saw the lineup today. Cedric Hunter going to get the start, so a little bit of a surprise. Not only that he makes the team, but he also gets the opening day start. So we already have some surprises here. But, overall, what did you think of the spring? What did you learn about this team from spring training?
Well, I think in the spring we learned that this team can be fun to watch at times. I think from the feedback we got from a lot of fans on Twitter and Facebook, I think fans really enjoyed watching these young players play this spring. And I think they're going to be fun to watch throughout the season. And I think the excitement level of the fans right now is bigger than it's been in a long time.
Frank, by the way, has the 2016 Phillies Outlook over at 97.3 ESPN.com. Today's lineup: Cesar Hernandez, Odubel Herrera, Maikel Franco, Ryan Howard, Carlos Ruiz, Cedric Hunter, Peter Borges, Freddie Galvis, all playing defense for Jeremy Hellickson, who will get the start today. Let's talk about Jeremy Hellickson, a improbable opening day starter for most, but here's a guy who has some pedigree, and the Phillies are hoping probably for some big things for not to make them a surprise team, but maybe to make him a worthy trade candidate.
Yeah, I think I think the reason why Jeremy Hellickson is a Philly is twofold. One, to be a trade piece down in July if all goes well, but first and foremost, take the pressure off of somebody like Aaron Nola and not make him be anointed the opening day starter or ace just yet. I think it's important that Nola gets to develop a little bit and not be thrown into that high-pressure role right off the bat. And starting Hellickson first, I think, does do just that. He's got a little bit of a veteran pedigree, former Rookie of the Year. So I think he'll be half mentor and half stabilizer for the Phillies rotation this year.
All right, some of the other guys who stand out in that lineup, let's go with the veteran Ryan Howard. It seems like a sentimental favorite to be in the lineup anyway. I'm sure most fans could care less whether they see Howard or not, but he's hitting in that four-hole today. But do you anticipate that Howard or Ruff will get more time at first base as this year goes on? Will actual production on the field dictate that, or will it be a straight platoon?
I think it's going to be a straight platoon to start. Just works out that the Phillies are facing a right-hander. By the way, last week when I had no idea who could possibly start for the Reds, their entire rotation ended up on the disabled list. So we're facing the unknown Raisel Iglesias, and who is a right-handed pitcher. So Howard would get the start no matter what. I think if there was a lefty, they would throw him out there otherwise. But Pete McCannon has said that it looks like that they're going to go with a straight platoon at first base. And given that a majority of the starters in baseball are right-handed, well, Howard will get more of the starts, but I don't think they'll hesitate to pull him later in games if a tough lefty comes up to face Howard. But I think in terms of the Phillies lineup, you have to bat Ruff and Howard fourth because you really don't have a lot of other options. Losing Aaron Altair does hurt because he at least had some power to bring to the table. But right now, who's going to bat behind Maikel Franco?
That's a great question, and I was going to bring him up. Because of the situation with Ryan Howard and there's not a lot of offense around, one of the Atlanta guys had asked me who in this lineup could hit the ball out of the park. I said Franco can, but who's going to throw any pitches to him? What kind of season can we anticipate for Franco? Obviously, he led the spring with home runs with 9. He has really exceeded a lot of people's expectations. What kind of season could Maikel Franco have?
Charlie Manuel said 30 and 100, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs. He does have the two players in front of him that are going to get on base the most, in Cesar Hernandez and Odubel Herrera. So I think he will have an opportunity to drive in some runs. I do think his raw power will make some home runs out of balls that even aren't hit that well. And we saw that in spring training. Even when a pitcher did not throw him a meatball, he still found a way to make contact, and some of those balls traveled way further than most players will. So I think his raw power is going to make him hit at least 30 home runs, even if they're starting to pitch around him. And that will be the big kind of deciding factor of how well he does this year is when the pitchers make adjustments to Franco. given that the scouting reports are all out and for the first time, and all the pitchers will have read them facing Franco this year. Will he make those adjustments when pitchers adjust to him? But I think his raw power will take advantage of the stakes. He'll take advantage of some balls that aren't hit so well going out. So I think he's still poised to have a big season no matter what.
Frank Klose is with us at Frank Klose 973. Cesar Hernandez will bat leadoff today. And is this the position that you think fits him best for his long term? I mean, is he a leadoff guy, or are they just basically using him out of necessity?
I think he's poised to be a decent enough leadoff hitter. If you remember back to 2013 when Ben Revere was out for the year, they just sort of threw him in center field, and he was their leadoff hitter for a good stretch, and he performed very well. His bat was surprisingly good in 2013. Now, the problem is since then they've really had to struggle to find steady time to get him into the lineup because Revere came back, Chase Utley's been around, and this is going to be really the first time where he's able to play his natural position and just hit. He doesn't have to worry about when he's going to start next. He doesn't have to worry about being in a strange position in center field. He's just going to be able to play. And even when he did have consistent at-bats, even though he was just sort of thrown into center field that year, he still performed to a very high level as a leadoff hitter and got on base at a decent clip. So he got on base at a 344 clip in that 2013 season in that limited action. So I think he can do it. I think he can be selective with his pitches. He does have the ability to bunt a little bit and make some base hits with his speed. So I think in this lineup he is the best choice for the position, especially since he's left-handed, and whether they're facing a righty or lefty, he'll be able to lead off the game.
Frank, Pete Monday, today actually, that they could use any one of 5 different guys at the closer position. Get your thoughts on how you think that bullpen will go, how it will look this season. I mean, a lot of people thought David Hernandez, but who are some of these other guys in the bullpen that maybe our listeners aren't that familiar with that they might see in some high-pressure roles?
Well, one, I personally think it's a big mistake not to anoint a closer. One thing that a lot of closers have said repeatedly over the years is that when a reliever knows what his role is and can get himself ready for that particular role, they pitch much, much better. Now, it's kind of commonplace that the back end of the bullpen, hangs out on the dugout for the 5th inning and then headbutt out to the bullpen. Right now, if you don't know who's going to close, they're not really able to do that. So I think right now that you're going to see a bullpen of people kind of sitting around, not knowing when it's going to be their turn to pitch. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best idea. Even if it was a less than perfect person to name the closer, I would have just done it and kind of set up some sort of regularity in pitchers coming in. Otherwise, I think the only person that has a clearly defined role is Daniel Stumpf is going to be your left-handed, one guy out, or a loogie, as they tend to call those players, because he's shown in the minor leagues he can get lefties out. So we might see him for a batter in the 6th or 7th inning. Other than that, it's kind of a crapshoot as to who will do what. I think Brett Oberholzer is the long man right now. I can him working into a back end of a bullpen kind of role as time goes on, just because I think he's not, of the people that are there, I think he's not as prone to blow-ups. So that's something we could see down the line, but it's probably going to start out with him as the long reliever. But James Russell, he makes the bullpen as a left-handed reliever. Because of his experience in the major leagues with the Cubs most recently, I think he'll get some back opportunities. I think he'll be the lefty they bring in last. But it doesn't sit well having no clear closer. I think Dahlia, Hossa would have had a shot, but he struggled a little bit down the stretch in the spring. David Hernandez, he hasn't really enough to really give you that confidence, but I still would have just picked one of them and called him the closer.
Yeah, and Honosa really well last year when he came over here from Boston. He was a guy that maybe be in that setup role. We'll see. That bullpen could be very interchangeable. And look, there's a lot of guys down at AAA. It's almost like these two bullpens are going to be in constant competition all year long to get call-ups and be sent back down. You're probably going to see a lot of rides between Philadelphia and Lehigh Valley.
And I personally was not totally on board with Luis Garcia being sent to AAA. I think he's a more effective option than Hector Neris. And when it came down to the end of camp, it was a matter of 40-man roster spots. If you brought Neris as your last bullpen piece, then you wouldn't have to add anybody to the 40-man roster. If you sent him down and tried to put in Andrew Bailey or Ernesto Frieri, then you had to figure out which player in your system you're going to have to get rid of or risk slipping through waivers. And I think right now the Phillies just didn't want to lose anybody. There were very few straight cuts out of the organization. So I guess I get what they're doing. Their priority right now is keeping as many guys as possible under their control, but it kind of puts them in a precarious situation with how the bullpen functions.
Give me your thoughts on Nola. Is he a guy that you think could be a letdown candidate? Is he, Pat Combs here? Is he going to be brilliant as a rookie and then next year just completely fall apart? What's your take on Nola, who, many people look at him as maybe not a future ace, but a top of the rotation kind of guy?
Yeah, I think Nola sometimes got a little too much hype last year because in a year when we could go through it take an hour to go through the names of all the different starters the Phillies used last year that were just nightmares. So he kind of came in, brought some stability, and because he was the one pitcher that fans could look forward to as a prospect, I just fear that sometimes the expectations on him might be a little too high for what he is. But I do think he has the potential to be a very solid number 2 pitcher in a rotation. And the caution will be not to get overly worked up if he takes some lumps this year. If he went 11-11 with a 4.5 ERA or a 4 ERA, would people be surprised? I think they would, because I think they sort of have in their mind that he's going to be the next major ace. But realistically, I think if those expectations are that high, people might be disappointed because he is still a young starter. It's a game of adjustments. Like we were just saying with Maikel Franco, there's going to be a scouting report out on Nola. The batters that are going to face him this year, they're going to know where he had his success, and they're going to look for those pitches. And then Nola's going to have to adjust to that. So it's all about the adjustments in baseball, and there just hasn't been enough time to really see if Nola adjusted to the adjustments. So there could be some times this year where the batters know where he's going to throw, and they hit him hard, and that's okay. But I just don't want people to think he's going to come in and put together a Cole Hamels or Cliff Lee-esque season and go 15-3, because it's probably not going to happen.
All right, if Nola is a young guy in the rotation that that people know a lot about because he was such a high pick, who's another guy, though, a younger guy in that rotation that you think might even be more entertaining to watch?
Well, I think Velasquez has a really high ceiling, and if he's able to go deep in games this year, I think he could have a pretty impressive season. The thing on Velasquez, we know he pitches very hard, and a lot of times with those flamethrower-type starters, the question is, one, can they balance it for 6-7 innings at a time and not sort of not so much blow their arm out, but if they put too much oomph into all their pitches the whole game, then they lose some velocity later in the games as they go. So if he's able to develop a really good fastball that he's able to manage and go deep into games, and you can pair that up with some nice off-speed stuff, I think he could really develop into a really nice starter. A lot of people think because of his high heat, he's a good candidate for a back-end bullpen role down the line, but they're going to give him his shot to be a starter first, and really the jury's kind of out as to whether or not he's going to be able to pitch deep into ball games and really use that fastball to his advantage, because he really does have a lot of talent.
I was going to ask you, Frank, whether or not he'd be better off just being a guy who's a possible closer. I know this team traded Kenny Giles away for the notion that they didn't need a closer really at this stage of the game, but you wonder if Velasquez projects down the road when this team starts to turn the corner as a better starter or a better possible closer.
Yeah, I think that'll work itself out. If he can't go deep in the games, if he's going 5 innings and that's it, well, then probably they're going to give the starting opportunity to somebody else. If he can go deep into games, that would be a signal that he's in the right spot. But if he can't go deep into games, I think then they'll give him serious consideration to being a closer, because if he can come out, throw 3 outs, his fastball just fire past all these hitters, That's not that's not a bad thing to have in a closer. So I think this year it's important to give him the opportunity to start first. And if that's not really his thing, then maybe transition to closer, because if you look at some of the best closers in history, they were people that had the good stuff and didn't really make it as a starter. So Brad Lidge started in the major leagues. Billy Wagner started; he was a starter and failed at it, and then he ended up being a dominant reliever. Just to name a couple of the Phillies' most recent type closers. Ryan Madson's another one. Didn't really cut it as a starter, but developed into a nice back end piece. So usually the back end of the bullpen types were people that started and they sort of figured out along the way that they were better suited for a bullpen role, and this will be his opportunity this year to see which one it is.
Yeah, Mariano Rivera, another guy who started without a lot of success before he became the greatest closer in the history of baseball.
Exactly.
Franco, probably the best offensive player in that lineup. Who's next?
That's a good question. Depends what type of offense you're looking for. Hernandez and Herrera, they're going to be your on-base types. And the next person in line for power would be the Howard and Rough platoon. Beyond that, I mean, you might get a little power out of Cedric Hunter, but you're not really getting power out of the likes of Peter Borges and Freddie Galvis, and I think that's where you sort of hit a dead zone in the lineup, is the later part of the lineup, because even if Peter Borges replicates his best year, which was 2013. He's not going to be a power guy, and he'll hit maybe 280. So if you just mean best in terms of power, there's really not a whole lot behind Franco, but Cesar Hernandez and Odubel Herrera will be good on base types, and probably a lot of the way that they're going to make their runs happen this year is the likes of those two getting on base, stealing a base, bunting runners over, putting them into scoring position where it just takes a fly ball from Franco or Howard or Ruff or whoever's in that position. And I think Cameron Rupp, he has a little bit to offer in his bat. I think he's developing along nicely now. He was hitting the cover off the ball in spring training, and of course it's just spring training. But when you're hitting in the 470s and you're going into the last week of spring training, that probably means you're seeing the ball pretty well. So Rupp might surprise you a little bit in terms of the offensive production. And it looks like the catcher is going to have to hit fifth this year in this lineup.
Yikes. All right. Speaking of, some of the younger players out there, I was at the Flyers game Saturday. You were at the Phillies game, so we had it both covered. I like the fact that, the futures thing. I like seeing those players, and I like thinking about a guy like Franco in the lineup with J.P. Crawford, Nick Williams, Jorge Alfaro, Roman Quinn. Williams, I thought, really looked good. He looks like a guy comfortable and ready to play when called upon. What did you see from the futures couple teams? Let's be honest, Frank, a lot of people have more inquiries about those guys than the current crop of Phillies.
Well, one name I want to throw out there to really watch this year would be Dylan Cousins. Now, he was a second-round pick of the Phillies a few years back, and we really saw some really, really good tools from him over the weekend, both in Reading and in Philly. In Reading, he hit a really long home run, and then in playing right field in the futures game on Saturday, man, he just gunned Freddie Galvis out at the plate. It was one of those plays where, of course, the third base coach would send the runner in that situation, but man, right from his arm to Andrew Knapp, and Knapp put a nice tag on, and that was very impressive. So I really want to see what he sort of develops into this year. He's only 21 years old, going into his age 22 season. He turns 22 in May. So he's still pretty young, and he hasn't really played above Double-A yet. So I really would like to see what he does with these tools as he continues to develop. But he really did catch our attention. And Nick Williams, yeah, I would agree with you. He kind of looks like he belongs. Now he was playing left field, and Cousins was in right field. Williams probably projects to be a left fielder if you're going to count Alper into the mix for next year. But I think Williams is going to be perhaps that left-handed bat to hit behind Maikel Franco come next year.
All right, we asked fans over at Twitter at 973ESPN, how many wins will the Phillies have this season? Votes have been coming in all morning long. Frank, what do you put down as your final record?
Well, I don't really put anything down just yet. We actually did a poll of our writers on Philadelphia asking the same question, and I couldn't really give a number. There's just too many variables right now because we tend to know that the team that finishes the season is not going to be the team that starts the season. We'll see some prospects come up. We'll see some veterans shipped out in trades, and it's really hard to say. A lot of the young players that will come up when they trade the likes of Hellickson and Morton and maybe a guy like Peter Borges, the ones that come up, they're likely to take their lumps. So we might see a drop off once we make the switch to some veterans to some future stars for the team. So I find it really hard to put a win total on there. What I will say is I think the Reds look absolutely awful.
Atlanta's pretty bad too.
Yeah, they're the two that I think are definitely worse than the Phillies this year. And I can see the Phillies sweeping the Reds this series. I could see the Phillies beating up on the Braves a lot this year. So I think they'll have more wins than last year. I think they won't flirt with 100 losses like last year, but you're probably not looking at a team that wins more than 70-ish games, maybe 72, 73. A really successful one would be 76, but that's if everything goes right.
All right, our listeners have 47% between 59 and 69, 37% between 70 and 79, 10% say 90 playoffs, baby, and 6% say 80 to 89. So a high percentage in that 59 to 69 range and 70 to 79 range. About 80% of listeners out there think that this is going to be a pretty bad team this year, but much more exciting than years past. Frank Klose with all the coverage of this year's Phillies over at 973ESPN.com. Take a look at his 2016 outlook for the team. It is posted right now at Frank Klose, 973. First pitch in about 45 minutes from right now. Thank you, Frank. Enjoy the season.
Thank you. Enjoy the game, everybody.